name of Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson is a drunk at the time, but he will become the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. He, just before this period of time, got to know some people called the Oxford movement, which was a Christian movement but has some very, very dark background to it as well, too. And that had a lot of effects on his work as well, too. But that's for a whole other story, talking about the Oxford movement. But he goes to this hospital for this very bizarre treatment of given these ancient drugs. And during his hospital treatment, he says he had a mystical experience with God. And this was the experience that he talked about for the rest of his life. He said he had a sensation of flight, which is obviously from the henbane, and this experience of being set on a mountaintop. And his exclamation was, if this is the God of the preachers, then I accept it, or something to that effect. So he associated that with what he referred to as God or higher power, to later state to what he experienced. Now, he had a very interesting life that many people don't know about. He said that he actually channeled the 12 steps that he wrote about in his book from a 15th century monk, from the resources I have. And this is because he maintained an interest in spiritualism the rest of his life. But he says this came from this other intelligence that provided this information. And in fact, his biographer said that he had something in his house called the spooky room at his home, where they would go do seances or Ouija board activity, and so they were definitely into that. He also got really involved in the consumption of LSD, and he was part of a study group back in the 50s and I guess 60s, studying its use for assistance. People who assisted him were Aldous Huxley, a gentleman who has also a very sordid past from Brave New World and his plan to actually keep most of the world's population drugged on soma. It's talked about in his writing, his globalist writings that he had of an elite running over a drug populace. People like Gerald Hurd, who I've since learned was one of the earliest prominent New Age teachers in America in consciousness expansion. Even Claire Booth Lucci, who was a congressional figure, female congressional figure, whose husband operated the Time magazine. So a very interesting group. But he mentioned in this consumption of LSD that the experience he had was basically identical to his religious experience he had in that hospital, which is what he considered his contact with God. Now, coming here toward the end, I just want to share a little bit about what's coming, what we think is coming. Here is a quotation I'm going to give from one of the most prominent New Age leaders, Barbara Marx Hubbard. She's a woman who actually narrowly missed getting the vice president nomination for the Democratic ticket in 1984. Very influential person, particularly in global circles, and even with some evangelical figures, believe it or not. She had a message that she said she channeled from her spirit, and here's what the message she was given. It says, this is her spirit guide speaking. It says, out of the full spectrum of human personality, 1/4 is electing to transcend. 1/4 is destructive, and they are defective seeds. Now as we approach the quantum shift from the creature human to the co-creative human, the human who is the inventor of godlike power, the destructive 1/4 must be eliminated from the social body. Fortunately, you are not responsible for this act. We are. We are in charge of God's selection process for planet Earth. He selects, we destroy. We are the riders of the pale horse, death. So this is a plan of spiritual rumble that's planning in our future. I spoke at a conference that was sponsored by the United Nations and World Council of Churches. That is a non-governmental organization, NGO, sponsored by this group, creating a new world religion called the Order of the Transfiguration. And the conference, international conference I spoke at in 2008, had the theme of reconnecting heaven and earth. And the theme, as they described it off the brochure, says that they will be discussing new sciences of consciousness and healing, which could potentially reconnect the worlds of spirit and space in the human psyche. And this is, again, what's being underwritten by the United Nations. And the cover of the brochure has a goddess who actually has the earth in one hand and has these stars in the other hand, where she's reconnecting the stars to earth itself. as a type of liminal goddess. Now, a couple more points. There's another interesting character, and this person goes back to the time of the Babylon working with Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. The female who they say that they conjured her appearance suddenly from an earlier magical working they did was a woman by the name of Marjorie Cameron. She assisted them in the Babylon working in 1946, January, with the goal of releasing the whore Babylon, which they were planning to be the consort for Horus, or the Antichrist, which was the resurrected Osiris. Ironically, she referred to herself later, and she was very prominent after this event. She starred in movies by the occult filmmaker Kenneth Anger. She was a main star of it. She was a head of occult circles the rest of her life. But she referred to herself as a female as the Wormwood Star. So she clearly saw a female personification in their internal teaching to a feminine personality known as Wormwood and as a star itself. Just another quick comment back in Acts chapter 19, the chaos at Ephesus. I mentioned this Black Awakening connection, and I think people can read that to see if there's anything to this mass invocation of demonic spirits in people, that there's sort of a initial run of it in Acts 19 when you see how the people were taken over and almost cost the life of Paul and his followers, chased them into the arena, if I can remember right, or the amphitheater at the time. So, in closing, I just want to say that I'm putting a further hypothesis here that this leads me to suspect that there are plans that are being prepared for a future mass evocation of this wormwood god or goddess. And there's three aspects that appear to me from the literature that are required to have a successful mass evocation. The first, it helps to have the use of drugs to chemically assist humans in establishing contact and opening portals to the spirit world, to actually overcome whatever limitations we have, any barriers to overcome them. And I would say that if you do some studying in this, you will find, and you're probably already aware, most of you, that a very large portion of our population is already on mood-enhancing or reality-altering drugs. Many of these are, in fact, tryptamine-based products that affect our neurotransmitters, and in many ways are very, very close cousins, very similar in their look to serotonin, to DMT, and similar chemicals itself. And their chemistry is just very, very close to hallucinogens and their effect on neurotransmitters. The long-term effects of these chemicals, since there really so many of them are new in this generation, are not understood, but they have documentation where some of these drugs have gone and had the opposite effect at a later date, unexpectedly, of psychotic events that result in suicides, that result in death events of people, and even some of the mass shootings which we've had, and some of these shootings at schools and things, they have later found out that some of these chemicals, these people were on them, and suspected that exacerbated an event that caused this effect. Now, I also want to make sure people are aware that it's not just drugs that you take that can cause this. This also includes foods. And we are surrounded by an atmosphere of genetically modified foods. Our corns and soybean are almost 100% genetically modified. Other drugs or other foods are in this case. Also the water we take. I heard Brother Chris's comment about my water here. Fluoride is in a large portion of the population. And further study, by the way, I did on fluoride shows that it does have an assisting effect. One would think because of this calcification process in the pineal that it actually inhibit its performance. But other literature I found that fluoride chemicals can actually help take these particular drugs and transmit them and get them through to the neurotransmitters. They help facilitate their function. But our prescription drugs right now are probably the most abused drugs for hallucinogenic experiences or even religious experience, for things that aren't illegal. Sometimes they're prescription, sometimes they're over the counter, but those are being used right now. And to keep an open mind on what we ingest as being possible use for sorcery, I'd just like to remind our listeners that what did Satan offer Eve for her first experience like this, her first mystical experience to be illumined and to know knowledge? It actually was a food. He suggested she eat a particular food, and this would open eyes and help her see good and evil. So it's not just chemicals you take. It can be foods and other things that have this effect. The second leg of the triad for mass evocation are rituals. And rituals are events like you picture for magic spells and activities that occur. My hypothesis and my suggestion is that rituals, the reason why they're a key component to the evocation is they have some kind of effect in focusing faith. That there's some further human limitation in being able to stay focused in the spirit world, and rituals assist humans in being able to stay focused. And